headline the Barefoot Messenger. The cobblestones of Edinburgh burned with summer heat on the day 14-year-old Robert McLeod decided he would rather die than beg for one more coin. It was August 1828, and Robert had spent the morning outside the Royal Exchange, cap in hand, watching prosperous merchants pass without seeing him, invisible, worthless, a street rat in a city that had thousands just like him. His mother had died 2 winters ago, coughing blood into rags they couldn't afford to replace. His father had vanished before Robert could walk, off to sea. His mother always said, though Robert suspected the truth was grimmer and closer to home. Now Robert slept in stairwells, ate when he could steal or beg successfully, and felt the cold certainty that this was how he would die, young, hungry, and forgotten. But that afternoon, everything changed because of a man's impatience and Robert's quick feet. A merchant named William Dalrymple burst out of the exchange in obvious distress, looking frantically up and down the street. "I need a messenger," he shouted. "5 shillings to whoever can reach the port within 20 minutes. My shipment's being unloaded to the wrong warehouse." Several boys started running immediately. Robert recognized them. Street boys like himself, desperate for 5 shillings. But Robert didn't run. Not yet. He approached Dalrymple instead. "Sir, the port's 2 miles. Nobody can run that in 20 minutes. Not through city traffic." Dalrymple's face reddened. "Then I'm ruined. That shipment's worth £300. "But sir," Robert continued calmly, "I know shortcuts through the winds and closes that carriages can't take. I can be there in 15 minutes, and I'll bring back written confirmation of the message's delivery, so you know I didn't just take your money and run." Something in Robert's directness, the lack of groveling, the clear thinking under pressure, made Dalrymple look at him properly for the first time. "You're confident." "No, sir. I'm desperate, but I'm also fast and honest. Your choice." Dalrymple handed him a sealed note and 5 shillings. 15 minutes. The portmaster's office. Go. Robert ran like death itself chased him. Through alleyways too narrow for carts. Over walls that cut minutes off the official routes. His bare feet, toughened by years on the streets, found grip where shoes would have slipped. He knew Edinburgh's hidden geography the way wealthy men knew their account books, intimately and with absolute certainty. He reached the portmaster in 13 minutes, delivered the message, waited for written confirmation, and ran back. 26 minutes total. Dalrymple was still at the exchange, pacing anxiously. Robert handed him the confirmation note, gasping for breath. Dalrymple stared at it, then at Robert, then laughed with pure relief. "By God, boy, you actually did it." "Yes, sir." "What's your name?" "Robert McLeod, sir." Dalrymple studied him with new interest. "Can you read and write, Robert McLeod?" "No, sir. Never had cause to learn." "But you understood the urgency without reading my message. You calculated the distance and time. You chose strategy over blind effort." Dalrymple made a decision. "How would you like permanent employment?" "I need someone who can deliver messages quickly and reliably across Edinburgh. The business pays 8 shillings weekly. You'd sleep in my warehouse and eat 1 meal daily at my expense." Robert's throat tightened. 8 shillings weekly. Regular meals, a roof, Sir, I accept. For the next 2 years, Robert became the fastest messenger in Edinburgh. He learned the city like other boys learned alphabets. Every street, every shortcut, every time-saving route. Merchants began requesting him specifically. "Get McLeod's boy," they'd say. "He's reliable." But Robert was learning more than geography. Carrying messages between merchants, he heard them discuss trade, negotiate deals, plan ventures. He absorbed the language of business like a sponge absorbs water. And he noticed something crucial. Information had value. Knowing something first, knowing it accurately, knowing it before your competitors, that was worth more than gold. At 16, Robert made a proposal to Dalrymple. "Sir, you pay me 8 shillings weekly to deliver messages, but I deliver messages for many merchants, not just you. What if I formalized it? Created a proper messenger service that multiple merchants could subscribe to. Guaranteed delivery times, written confirmations, a reputation for absolute reliability." Dalrymple raised an eyebrow. "You want to compete with me?" "No, sir. I want to expand what I do for you into a service that helps all Edinburgh's merchants. You taught me business. Now I want to build one. With your blessing, if possible." Dalrymple considered this. "What do you need?" £50 to start. I'll repay it with interest from profits. And I'll teach myself to read and write properly, because I can't run a business on spoken word alone." The loan was granted. Robert rented a tiny office near the exchange, hired 3 other street boys as runners, and established McLeod's Express messenger service. His promise was simple but revolutionary. Guaranteed delivery within specified time frames, or the customer paid nothing. In 1830s Edinburgh, where unreliable messengers were the norm, this guarantee was radical. Robert drove himself mercilessly. He spent nights teaching himself to read using merchants' documents and newspapers. He created routing systems that maximized efficiency. He treated his runners with respect and paid them fairly, not from kindness alone, but because he understood that reliable service required reliable workers, and reliability required treating people well. Within a year, McLeod's Express had 40 regular business subscribers. Within 2 years, they'd expanded to include residential customers, wealthy families who needed messages delivered across Edinburgh and to nearby towns. Within 3 years, Robert employed 20 runners and had repaid Dalrymple's loan with 15% interest. But Robert saw farther than most. By 1835, at 21 years old, he recognized that Scotland's cities were growing rapidly. Glasgow, Aberdeen, Dundee, all expanding with industry and trade. Merchants in these cities needed what Edinburgh merchants needed: reliable, fast communication. Robert invested every penny of profit into expansion. He established offices in Glasgow and Aberdeen, hired local managers, created a network where messages could pass between cities with unprecedented speed and reliability. When the railroad began connecting Scottish cities in the 1840s, Robert immediately negotiated contracts to have his messengers travel on trains, cutting delivery times dramatically. By 1845, McLeod's Express was Scotland's largest private messenger and courier service. Robert employed over 200 people across 6 cities. His annual profit exceeded £2,000. The barefoot beggar boy had become one of Edinburgh's respected businessmen. But success brought challenges wealth couldn't solve. Larger companies, backed by aristocratic money, began competing aggressively. They undercut prices, spread rumors about McLeod's reliability, used political connections to block his expansion. Robert faced a choice: fight a war he'd probably lose, or sell to his competitors at the peak of his business's value. Most men would have fought from pride. Robert had different priorities. In 1848, he sold McLeod's Express to the Royal Mail Service for £12,000, an enormous sum, but less than the business was truly worth. His competitors celebrated, thinking they'd driven him out. They were wrong. Robert had simply seen what they hadn't: that private messenger services would eventually be absorbed by government postal systems anyway. He'd sold at the right time, on his terms, rather than waiting to be crushed. At 34 years old, Robert McLeod was financially secure for life. But financial security wasn't enough. He'd escaped poverty, but poverty itself remained. Every day, he saw boys on Edinburgh's streets who looked exactly like he'd looked at 14. Desperate, invisible, convinced they'd die hungry and forgotten. Robert established the McLeod Foundation with £8,000 of his fortune, dedicating it to a simple mission: teaching street children practical skills that could lift them from poverty. Not abstract education, but concrete training in trades, apprenticeships with established businesses, and crucially, connections to employment. Poverty isn't lack of intelligence, Robert told the Foundation's first board. It's lack of opportunity and connection. These children are as clever as any gentleman's son. They simply need someone to see that cleverness and give it room to grow. Over the next 20 years, the foundation helped over 800 street children learn trades and find employment. Dozens of them became successful tradesmen. Several became businessmen. One became a member of parliament. But Robert's most important contribution wasn't the foundation. It was simpler and more profound. He treated street children like people. When wealthy Edinburghers complained about having to see ragged boys at foundation events, Robert replied coldly, "Good. Look at them. Remember that I was them. Remember that intelligence and worth aren't distributed by birth. Remember that the boy you ignored this morning could be the man you do business with in 20 years. And treat them accordingly." When Robert McLeod died in 1878, at 64 years old, his funeral was attended by hundreds. Businessmen he'd worked with, foundation students he'd helped. But the most striking attendees were the old street boys, now middle-aged men with families and businesses of their own, who gathered to honor the barefoot messenger who'd shown them that poverty was a condition, not a destiny. One of them, speaking at the graveside, said, "Robert taught us that speed matters less than direction. He ran fast, yes, but more importantly, he ran toward something better, not just away from something worse. And he brought as many of us along as he could carry." That epitaph captured the truth. Robert McLeod's story wasn't extraordinary because he escaped poverty. Many do. It was extraordinary because of what he did with his escape. He could have built walls to separate himself from the streets that raised him. Instead, he built bridges to help others cross. the barefoot messenger who'd run through Edinburgh's wines carrying other men's messages, had spent his success carrying a different message. That the distance between the gutter and greatness is measured not in luck or birth, but in opportunity recognized and seized, then extended to those still waiting for their chance. Robert McLeod ran fast and far, but he never forgot to look back, to reach down, to pull up those coming behind. And in that choice, between climbing alone and bringing others with him, he proved that true success isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you make possible for others.